it was like a huge wake-up call for me. And so here I am. I followed my dreams. I went out and I took a step of faith. I took action. And here I am living in my sister's house, my wife and 3 kids, feeling defeated, feeling like a loser, feeling like a nobody. And you might be feeling like that as you're listening to this. You might be feeling like I stepped out, I did something. But here's what I didn't know at the time. I didn't know that I needed to step out and I needed to follow a plan. Welcome to the Chefprenuer podcast, where you'll learn to have more freedom, less stress, more income, and no boss through your personal chef business. I'm Chef Andres Hinojosa, and I want to help you revolutionize what it means to be a personal chef and show you the blueprint to building your own business. For more information, head over to chefprenuer.com. Hey, welcome back to the Chefprenuer podcast. I'm Andres Hinojosa. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, I actually want to dive into my story today a little bit more and really share with you guys this whole journey that I've called of becoming a chefpreneur throughout my life. And so honestly, I feel really blessed where I am today. I'll go into where I am right now, but I'm gonna talk about first how it hasn't always been that way. And many of you guys are listening to this podcast, you could probably resonate the trials and errors that you've had when you've tried to attempt to do something for yourself or build a business. And if I'm really transparent with you, I'm going to open up a little bit more today on today's episode about really the struggles I had and getting real with you to understand that you might see me on YouTube, you might be hearing me on my podcast, on Facebook Lives, but again, I have a story that I went through, and I wanted to encourage you today to understand that it's not about where you are right now, it's about how you finish, right? It's not how you start, it's how you finish. As I started to grow through my career, I've been a chef for over 17 years. Going on 18 years actually. And honestly, like I said, I feel really blessed where I'm at today. I'm able to spend more time with my family. I'm able to have that freedom that I've been wanting all of my life when I've been dreaming about becoming an entrepreneur, what I call a chefpreneur. But again, that wasn't always my reality. So if I go back for quite a bit of ways, when I graduated culinary school and I went out on my journey of becoming a chef, I started very, very young. I actually skipped first grade in school, so I was able to graduate early and take advantage of that. And I went to culinary school, which, by the way, culinary school is not bad. It was a lot of money. Was it worth it? Probably not, to be very straightforward with you. But I met a lot of really great people in San Francisco. And when I graduated culinary school and I moved to Chicago, I had this big starry-eyed image of what being a chef was, right? I'm in this big city. I used to dream about being downtown and cooking at an upscale restaurant. And for most of you listening to the podcast and watching me today, you're probably thinking, you know what, chef, like that's my dream. My dream is to work in some big fancy dancy restaurant or a hotel or own your own restaurant someday, right? That was my dream as well. Like I wanted to work myself to work up the ladder and then eventually run my own restaurant, right? And I think most of us listening to this, if you're in the industry or coming from the industry, you want that, right? You want to own your own business. And as I went through this journey and I started basically from the bottom, right? Came out of culinary school, of course. Anybody that knows the real life of being a chef or a cook at that, for that matter, you don't start at the top, you start at the bottom. And I worked my way through the Ritz-Carlton hotels and Four Seasons. And I was really blessed in my career to actually work for some amazing hotels. But as I started climbing that ladder, over the years, I got my first executive sous chef job when I was about 28 years old. And I felt like the politics at that point, I already kind of knew as I was working myself up the ladder that they were going to be kind of, sketch, because working in the industry, there's a lot of crap going on. It's high stress. You're seeing people at the restaurant more than you see your family. And it's kind of this like bubble, if you will, but especially behind the scenes in the back of the house with the chefs and the cooks. And as I started working again myself up the ladder and I got to an executive sous chef position, it got very real for me because it was more about the numbers. It was more about managing overtime, and it was more about these things than it was about the food or really even the guest experience. I mean, I hate to say it in that bluntly. And I remember I was the executive sous chef at the Hilton Resort, and I opened that hotel up from the ground up. There in Encinitas or in La Costa, California. And it was a great experience to open up a property. The problem was, again, it's like I had no life. I was working 60, 70, sometimes 75, 80 hours a week, especially when we were opening the hotel. And one of the biggest things that I realized was that I couldn't really grasp my family time or anything I was doing with my family. So as I became the executive sous chef, it was more about politics. It was more about numbers. It was more about managing, labor costs and food costs and all this stuff. It wasn't about the food. It wasn't about the guest experience. I hate to say it that way. And I started realizing that there was a lot of kissing butt. There was a lot of, sucking up to the powers that may be. And it started to take a heavy toll on me, because it wasn't that I don't like, obviously I don't like, it's not that I don't like leadership or I don't have respect for my leaders, but it was more in the sense of, I felt like we were getting away from what we were there to do. And I started to kind of feel like, here I am in this job, I'm making good money. I'm finally an executive chef of some sort. And I was miserable. Again, I wasn't seeing my family. I was never home on weekends. I was never home on holidays. I was always working. And the thing is that I knew deep down inside of me, like many of you, I wanted to start a business. I wanted to start something for myself. But honestly, at one point, even when I was making good money, it's like to save up money and to try to gather things and funds to be able to like open a restaurant or something like that. It just felt like impossible to me. So I really felt stuck. And although from the outside in, people would look at me and, man, you were an executive at such a young age. And even like friends and family members were like, chef, I'm so proud of you. You're working your way up. And then when I became an executive chef, it even got even worse. I was there even longer. I had some more flexibility as me being the executive chef of a resort, but I had over 48 people underneath me, and it was a huge job, and I felt like I was always on call. And now, in my business, I am always on call. When you own your own business, you are always on call, but it's different. And I'm going to explain that to you here in a few minutes. But again, as I was sitting there and I felt accomplished, I was making 6 figures a year and I felt accomplished. I was literally seeing waitresses more than my wife. I was seeing kids in the restaurant more than I'd see my own kids at home. And at the time I had 3 kids, 3 beautiful daughters, and I'm a family guy. Like that's me. That's who I wanted to be. And I felt very empty. And it came to a point where I literally came into the parking lot of the hotel and I sat there for about 10 minutes. I was about 7 in the morning, 7:10, give or take. And I remember just having my hands on the steering wheel. And I was like, I just really did not want to be there. I was so over it. I was like, I have to do something different. Like I can't continue down this path. And at this time I was about 30 years old. And many of you might think, man, that's young to feel like you're over it. But again, my wife, my kids, they're like everything to me, right? And I was never able to go to church. I'm a faith-driven man. I was never able to go to church. I was always doing a brunch on Sunday or whatever in the hotel, or, and so it was really hard for me again to have this quality life. And I remember walking in that same day, I got out of my car reluctantly. I walked into the hotel, and first thing I'm greeted to is by the food and beverage manager. And he's talking to me about how we went like 0.3% over on overtime labor cost. And I'm like, I saved the company $900 and I did the math for him. And he's like, well, the investors and the board want to just see, like, they want to see percentages. And I'm like, I'm saving you money. And it just felt like the last straw. That same day I had 3 cooks call off. I had a sous chef call off because unfortunately he had a stroke like 4 months before that. And I was just fed up. I was just fed up. And again, I knew I wanted to do something on my own. And so what I did was I went home and I started rattling my brain, like, what can I do? I just got to step out. I got to step out in faith. I got to do something, because if I continue on this path, I don't care. It's like, I know I have the money, the money's coming in. I'm able to pay my bills, but I feel like I was just a slave to the job. And I came up with this idea, and I'm like, I'm going to go back to my roots, right? My dad is from South America, and I started my first kind of company called Picada Latin Cuisine. Many of you guys don't even know this. Again, this is why I'm telling you guys this on this podcast. And, I had this vision of like making empanadas and doing these steak sandwiches called churrascos and lomitos at the farmer's market. And it was something that my grandma used to make when I was young. So I was like, you know what, this is it. This is what I want to do. So I started working a little bit around, building a logo. And one of the guys I worked with at work, who was a server, he was like, you know what, let me partner with you, man. And like, we'll go in this on together. And, I saved up some money, and it wasn't like quite as much of a restaurant, but I dropped like 12, 13, $14,000 in equipment. I bought tents, I bought coolers, I bought plancha grills, I bought all these things to go start this catering and farmers market business. And I remember the day I put in my month notice, and I did put a month notice in because that's just the kind of guy I am, even though I was so fed up with the job. And I remember I felt so free. I remember getting these like button down shirts that had my logo patch on it. And, I stepped up my first farmer's market. I remember that day we set up, and I think we only did like $90 in sales. It was a brand new farmer's market in Embarcadero in downtown San Diego. And it was great. But again, it was like I was making no money. But to be honest with you, I was so blinded by the fact that I was just there being my own boss. It felt like 1,000,000 pounds was lifted off my shoulders. And I remember it so clearly. Like, my wife came, I had all these people from the church that I would kind of attend sometimes on like Wednesday night meetings if I could. I had them come out. They were like, coming to support me. My wife showed up. My daughters were able to be there. They're pouring lemonade for people. It was actually kind of a sweet moment. And here's the thing. I did that business. I left my full-time 6-figure job to go out and make sometimes $30 a day by slinging food at the farmer's market. But again, I felt so free. And it was a lot of work. I mean, it was so crazy. I ended up installing an ice machine in my garage just to save money on ice because, you need a lot of ice when you're going around, and a farmer's market might be an hour and a half away. And I financed like literally a Dodge Caravan. We call her Cherry Betsy. We still have her to this day. And she turns into a cargo van. I would load all my stuff on there and go out to this farmer's market. And again, I was living on cloud 9 until reality hit that I couldn't keep earning $30, $40 a day. And sometimes $100. A good day, I would make like $140 profit after I'd pay the farmer's market and after I'd pay all the groceries. And the catering part of it never really took off. So I had like this, I was renting out a commercial space. I had to rent out a commercial kitchen, and I had all these expenses, and it started to stack. Now, my partner that I told you about, he had a townhome that his mom was renting. And so I moved in there, and just to save money in rent, and he would give me a discount. And eventually the business was just kind of withering down. And I was, came to a point where literally there was some days where it's like, I got to buy ribeye steak, and I got to make my bread and buy the ingredients for my sauce, or buy diapers for one of my daughters. And there was many times where I would literally come home from the farmer's market, and I would take the change box, and I would literally take out $10, $15 from the change box just to go buy a 10-pack of diapers for my daughter and a gallon of milk. And I would sit there and I'd look at my wife, and I'm going to try not to get emotional on the podcast, but my wife is everything to me. She has been there through thick and thin, right? From making 6 figures and never seeing me, to then kind of not seeing me, but able to see me whenever she wants, but being broke as crap. And, to this day, it's like she's been supportive of me. And I remember I would look at her, and she would have this image on her face, this look on her face where it was like, everything's going to be okay, babe. Like, you got to keep going. But there was a lot of times I didn't want to keep going. Like, I couldn't sit here and just look at my wife and my kids and not provide for them. And I became a month behind on rent, and then 2 months behind, and 3 months behind. Even though the gentleman that was renting me the house was my partner, he's like, dude, I can't keep covering the mortgage. Like, you got to pay rent of some sort. And basically I got kicked out. I got kicked out of my townhome, and I couldn't completely understood. And I moved in with my wife and my 3 kids. We moved into my sister's house. And I love my sister, but it's challenging enough to live in someone else's house, let alone my sister. If you know my sister, I didn't have a plan. I didn't have anything. I was just so blinded by where I was at that I just wanted to like go ahead and take action on anything that I saw. And I believe that if I would have continued that business, I am sure maybe would have worked. It would have probably maybe covered my bills down the road. But this was only 7, 8 months later after I stepped out, and I was completely out of money. And again, living with my sister. And it got to a point where it was like, you know what? I'm a hustler, so I'm going to do whatever it takes to make things happen. And I remember one night in a conversation with my wife, I'm like, you know what, babe, like, I got to go get a job. And she's like, babe, you could get a job anytime. You have an amazing resume, but like, I'm not going to see you anymore. It's going to go back to the way it was. And I knew that, but I was like, what other options do I have? And there was a moment there where I did anything to just bring money in to help my sister pay her bills and pay the utilities. And, I sold solar. I drove Uber. I drove Lyft, in Cherry Betsy in this van that I bought. I was, being an Uber driver with this beautiful maroon van driving around San Diego. And I even got ridiculed by my friends. I got ridiculed by my family members telling me like, when are you going to get a real job? You're pathetic. I heard it all. And in that moment, I was like, you know what? If I'm going to go work for somebody, it has to be in some area that I want. I don't want to go work for some big corporation. And I was praying about it, and I felt like God answered my prayer, because shortly about, 3 weeks later, I get a call from one of the guys I used to work with. And he was like, you know what, Chef, like, we got somebody over here. One of the owners of the hotels I used to work at was looking for an actual private chef in his house. And I'm like, wow, that sounds pretty cool. Like, and the pay was like $70,000 a year. It was about $30,000 less than six figures what I was making, but I was cooking for two people, dinner only 5 nights a week. And so I was like, you know what, like, sign me up. Why not? Right. And it got me back on my feet. Well, so here I am, I'm going to La Jolla in this beautiful mansion. They built me like a brand new kitchen downstairs in the mansion. And I was a private chef. I was employed by him, and I was cooking every night for him and his wife. And it seemed good. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, you're my private chef, so now you're going to fly to New York with me. And I was gone over Christmas and New Year's. And here I was stuck again, working for someone else, not working for myself. And I started to have this feeling again, like, man, I got to do something else. I got to step out again. I can't have a job. Like, I don't want one. Like, I knew that I was in a tough place, because in one sense I needed to provide for my family. But another, I couldn't ignore this feeling that I felt that God put in me to be this entrepreneur, right? To do something for myself. And again, you might be thinking right now as you're listening to this, like, Chef, I resonate with you. Like, I've tried to do my own thing, and it just feels like it falls apart. And then like, I have to resort back to a job, but I can't inch that feeling. Well, I want to just take this a few minutes just to tell you that I really believe that God has a destiny for each and every one of us. And that there's things that he puts on the inside of us in our heart that won't go away, because it's what we're supposed to do. And I knew that. And so here again, I was like 2 months into this job, and I was already regretting it. I was like, I don't want to be cooking. And again, from the outside in, it was like, I would take the Bentley sometimes to go to Sur La Table and buy all these fancy gadgets for the kitchen, but I was still not happy. Why? Because it wasn't for me. I was still an employee. I was still somebody was my boss. And so as I went through that, I felt like God cut this off immediately, because I started it was getting bigger and bigger, this feeling inside of me, like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to be at this job. I was still living with my sister. And all of a sudden I get a call from his assistant. He's like, you know what? We're going to lay you off. Everything's been amazing. The food's been fantastic, but he's going to be doing a big deal in Texas, and he's not even going to be in San Diego hardly ever. And we know that you have a family and traveling back and forth. So he wants to give you a month's severance pay and cover your insurance for 3 months. And he was very generous, great guy, had nothing to do with him. But to be honest with you, I was a little bit like, oh man, what am I going to do for money? But a big portion of me was like relief, like, okay, I could try this again. But now that I was a private chef in someone's home, I was like, what if I do that? I want to do that. So I started researching. I started getting on the web, and I was like, you know what is that called? And I realized it was being a personal chef. And I can have multiple clients and not cook for one client and still be my own boss. And I was like, this is what I want to do. So I slowly, surely started to really put myself out there. I started to reach out to domestic agencies, as they call them, staffing agencies, working for, people that are needing a chef for 1 or 2 weeks that are visiting Beverly Hills or La Jolla and San Diego. And I started getting some footing there, and I still was not earning very much money. And then I was still doing solar and Uber and Lyft. And I went back to doing that just to kind of, again, put food on the table. And all of a sudden I started reading more books. I started diving in. I started realizing no one was out there teaching how to be a personal chef. And I was like, you know what? Like I'm gonna have to figure this out, but I really now know this is really what I want to do. And it was very different than the first time. The first time I felt like I was just trying to escape my job, right? And I just wanted to be an entrepreneur of any sort. And so I picked like catering and farmers market, and I didn't look at the math. I didn't look at like, can I earn money? Can I actually pay my bills with this? But this time around, I did it differently. I started researching like, okay, in order for me to pay my bills and me make this much money, I have to cook for this much people and I have to do this. And I was a mess. I was charging the way I teach you guys not to charge. I was doing everything that was opposite of what I teach now, but at least I was starting to get my footing. And I started reading different books about sales and about marketing and about messaging and about, building a website. And I went through all these trials and errors. And when I kind of put them all together, all of a sudden things started working. Clients started calling me back. I started closing more deals. I started raising my prices. And I got to a point where I started to become more successful. In my first kind of year and a half of being my own boss as a personal chef, I brought in like $80,000 for myself, which was huge. And then it just kept growing from there. I started learning more and I brought in another chef in my business so I didn't have to say no to like double bookings. And slowly but surely I grew. And what's crazy is people started asking me, Chef, like, how are you, like, all of a sudden they see things on Instagram, like I'm traveling here with a client or I'm cooking over here at this beautiful house with this beautiful view. And there's chefs that I used to work with that were like, Chef, how are you doing that? And I'm like, well, I started my own business and I started doing some of these principles. And then it turned into people that I didn't know starting to ask me through Facebook and Instagram. And all of a sudden the Chefprenuer podcast was born. I actually put out the podcast and say, you know what, maybe other chefs and cooks want to hear what I have to say about how I started my personal chef business. And you might be sitting here, if this is your first time again listening to this podcast, I'm gonna be like, who are you? I'm telling you some of my story. And you might say like, what authority you have? Like, and I'm not saying this again to brag, but I want to show you what's possible of being a chefpreneur and starting a personal chef business and being your own boss. Last year we did over $650,000 in sales. I have over 20 contracted chefs working in my company. I spend about 30 minutes a week doing payroll and overseeing the company. I have an amazing team. I have a full-time event coordinator who's coordinating and sending out invoices and scheduling the chefs, and I do talk to the chefs and I connect with them. But now my business is running itself. And even up to this point before this, I was making $250,000 take home by cooking because I was going out and cooking. And there was some months I bring in $30,000 into my pocket by doing this. And now I've helped hundreds of students do the same through our programs. And here's the thing, the reason I'm telling you all this story is, again, because most of you will see me, whether it's on Facebook, on YouTube, you'll hear this podcast, you'll think, oh yeah, it was easy for you. Like, you're Chefprenuer, you're Chef Andres. No, that's not how it started. Every single one of us has a journey. And the biggest thing that I can share with you, other than my story today, is really a few things. I want you to really take hold of learning from my story and taking a few takeaways home. You need to first understand that you have to chase your dream and follow your passion. If you don't, you're going to regret it. And you're going to keep trying. You're going to keep trying to go back to that job, just over broke job. You're going to keep trying to go back and go back. And you might need to at times. You might need to bring in money. I get it, right? If you have a family like I do. But don't stop chasing your dream, right? That's the first rule. You have to not stop. The Bible says in Galatians 6:9 that you'll reap a harvest if you don't give up. It doesn't say if you're super holy, you're spiritual, or you do everything right. It just says if you don't give up. I'm sitting here recording this podcast because I didn't give up. I look back at all that drama, all the things I went through. And if you think that your good old boy Andres here did not want to give up, I wanted to give up. There was days I wanted to give up 10 times a day. And honestly, my wife would tell me, you can't give up. Like, this is going to work, babe. I believe in you. Even with all the naysayers in our own family, my wife was the one that was sometimes driving me. And then it became in my mindset, like, I can't give up because I'm so far in. I have to make this work. I'm going to make this work. And I've invested in other people's programs. Again, I was looking for programs like the Chefprenuer program, and they didn't exist. To this day, they don't really exist, to be honest with you. But I was looking at other professionals. How do I market? How do I close deals? How do I sell better? How do I formulate my website? What needs to be on my website in order to attract people? And so I was investing. With the little money I had, I was putting things on credit cards. I was maxing things out just to invest, to bring me information to make this business work. And by doing so, I'm so glad I went through that journey because I've been able to see where all of you might be faltering. I've been able to see where most of you get held up and what you're doing wrong because I've been there and I've done that. All that trial and error, I want to be able to give to you all the kind of like the fast pass at Disneyland where you just cut in front of the line, where you don't have to go through all that pain and anguish that I went through. And you might have already gone through some pain and anguish, but I'm telling you right now, if you're listening to this podcast, it's not by accident. And I'm encouraging you that, again, first and foremost, you have to take action and not give up on following your dream. The number 2 thing I would give you anybody as advice as their journey of being a chefpreneur is to follow a proven path. Follow a proven path, right? If you're ever in the woods and you're trying to get to a river and there's like a path, it's like even just subconsciously, you follow that path down to the river. Why? Because there's been other people that have walked that path, and it's probably not going to go over a cliff. It's probably not going to go over a waterfall. It's probably going to go exactly where it's going to lead, straight down to the river, right? So again, most of us are trying to blaze our own path. We're trying to blaze our own trail. But the easiest way to do that is just to follow someone else who's already been there and done that, someone else who has blazed that trail. And I really have a heart to serve. My motto always is, if I'm not successful unless you guys are successful. And so in my story and through my journey, I'm trying to inspire and encourage you to know that not only can you do this, but I've laid out a path for you. I've helped people like you. And this is not me trying to just sell you a program. This is me trying to give you true advice that I had to go through the hard way of learning. And I sit here today with absolute true freedom in my family. You know, the other day, my wife we were sitting on the couch and I looked over at her and I'm like, babe, can you believe we're here? Can you believe where we've come from? Again, like coming back from a farmer's market, my wife would be helping me make this sauce while she's holding a baby and our bank account being negative at times, to then being here where my wife, which we now have 5 daughters, by the way, 5 daughters. Yeah, that's crazy. 5 daughters. And my wife's able to be at home with them full time. She homeschools my kids. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a chefpreneur. So we really not only do I have freedom personally, we have freedom as a family. We could do whatever we want. I could say, you know what, this Friday, Saturday, Sunday, babe, we're going to go to the lake and we're just going to have fun. Well, we don't have to approve it to anybody at school. We don't have to approve it to anybody from my boss. I am my own boss. This is my own business. And that freedom is attainable. And I have countless stories where we've helped students, passionate chefs and cooks, just like yourself listening to this, achieve the same results. But because of what success means to you, again, that's what's most important to me. Success for me looked like freedom with my family. And even though I'm financially doing really well, I'm not where I want to be financially, and that's okay. But my first and foremost thing was that freedom. It was that being my own boss, setting my own tone, being able to do what I want to do with my family, not having to rely on anybody else. And what's funny is all the family members, all the naysayers now, they look at my life and they're like, I don't even understand what he does. And they still don't get it. And so if you're sitting there right now listening to this and there's naysayers in your ear, most of them are never going to understand what you're going through, or they're going to not even care, and they never will, even when you have success. It's funny how when people start seeing me now with success, they're like, oh yeah, Andres, it was easy for him. Oh yeah, look at him. He's a big success now. No, they don't know all the story. They don't know the whole story, but now you do. I hope this encouraged you listening to this podcast today, because again, it's not about me. It's about you. Where are you at in your journey? What are you wanting to do? What's in your heart? What's the desire and the passion that you have to pursue this business? And if you're wanting to build a restaurant, by all means, go do that. If you want to start a food truck, I will say I have other podcast episodes where I break down the cost of those, because it's ridiculous, because you can start a personal chef business for a fraction of the cost. I look back at that. I wish I could get that $12,000, $14,000 back I originally invested in all the equipment for my farmer's market business. But this business, literally, you can start for less than $1,000. It's crazy. And it can reap you big rewards. But I hope this podcast helped you understand my story, hear me out, and I hope it encouraged you. In the Chefprenuer podcast, we're always talking about we want to motivate, educate, and inspire you to take action on your dreams, right? To basically fire your boss and become your own person in your own business with that freedom. I'll see you guys on the next podcast. Thanks for tuning in. We love you. And again, God bless you. We'll talk to you next week. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Chefprenuer podcast. If you're ready to start your personal chef business or take your business to the next level of freedom and income, I want to help. Head to www.chefprenuer.com for more information. Again, that is www.chefpreneur.com. That's CHEFPRENEUR.com. I have been in this industry for a long time and have made all the mistakes, so hopefully you don't have to. I'll see you next time on the Chefpreneur podcast.